imagination. Okay? We need moral imagination to delve deep into Gandhian world. And he was sad, he was kind of lamenting that we still lack that imagination to think Gandhi and to be the change we want to see in this world. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mahapatra. Dr. Masyada.
Well, I'm glad to follow all these fantastic comments. I don't have a lot to say, but a lot of my work, the work of the Institute, has focused on civil discourse and teaching current controversial issues and difficult topics and areas like that. And I think that fits in really well when we're talking about Dr. King and Gandhi, really thinking about the connection between civil discourse and nonviolence, and the role that really they should be playing together. What does that look like? The question I like to really think about, I can't answer, is a philosophy of nonviolence compatible with the social media era? And I am not necessarily sure that it is at this point, but maybe it's because I'm a pessimist. I am. Although Polish and from New England, so it comes naturally to be a pessimist. Go Sox, sorry. But at the same time, I like to think, I've done a lot of work recently talking about founding principles of the United States and our founding documents, and thinking about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And we've done a lot of work around, Dr. King calling back to those founding principles as a core element of his approach to the civil rights movement, and thinking about that. I think our founding principles lend themselves well to a philosophy of nonviolence as well. The pursuit of the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I appreciate the connection made between the practical and the theoretical, because I think when it comes to civil discourse, that's often the issue as well. In theory, civil discourse sounds fantastic, but in practicality, what does it actually look like? How do you approach it? I think the same thing holds true for nonviolence in thinking about these two individuals. So I look forward to the conversation this evening.
Thank you all. This is what I hope will be a fluid conversation amongst four brilliant scholars. And so my first question is this. Dr. Mahapatra had ended his comments on this idea of moral imagination. And so for any of the panelists, in what ways did Gandhi's spiritual beliefs shape his political strategies?
Gandhi's philosophical strategies were based on his moral values of non-violence and satyagraha. And I think Dr. Mahapatra can elaborate more on that. But since he's the one who has written a book, can you show the audience your book?
Thank you. So Gandhi never claimed he discovered nonviolence. He never claimed that. He says nonviolence is as old as Himalayas. But his novelty was how to apply that. If you look at Gandhi, in his time, it was a time when Lenin in Russia and Mao in China, they are all doing violent movements. Right? And Mao Zedong says, power flows from the belly of God. So Gandhi was the only leader at that time was fighting against colonialism through nonviolence. And it was not without resistance. Within his own party, Indian National Congress, one of his colleagues, Subhash Chandra Bose, and you must know him, he was asking him, Bapuji, and people called him Bapu as a respect Gandhi win the struggle through nonviolence. And then Subhash Chandra says that I studied 200 years of freedom struggles all over the world. There is not a single case when freedom was won through nonviolence. Gandhi's reply in his typical humanist way, Subhas, there are many pages yet to be written in the book of history. And we are going to exemplify the struggle, the success through nonviolence. And Gandhi was, like as I was making a quotation from Bertrand Russell, Gandhi was conceptarian. He used to read Bible, he used to read Quran, all the Hindu scriptures, and I would define his spiritual core in this word, in this phrase, Sab Dharma Sambhava. And even Gandhi improvised, he said, Sarva Dharma Mamabhava. So all religions, he used to say in a very interesting way, beautiful way, that all religions are like rivers, they're going to the same ocean, God ocean. All religions are like beautiful flowers in a garden. So Gandhi was, and that was one of the reasons why he was assassinated, because he had equal rigor for all religions. And one more thing I want to talk about, for Gandhi, he said, I hate the evil, not the evildoer. Because he had persistent optimism in him for transformation of human behavior, human nature. So he was compassionate, kind, like St. Francis. So he says, I hate evil, but not evildoer. I hate colonialism, I hate injustice, but I don't hate the British. So that is perhaps one of the reasons why he had such a large following within India. And leaders all over the world, Martin Luther King was Christian, Nelson Mandela, Nkrumah, Aung San, Buddhist, Dalai Lama, they're all influenced by Gandhian ideas.
Perfect, thank you. So given that connectivity, I'm wondering, and specifically for Dr. Dixon, how then does Dr. King adapt Gandhi's principles, to the context of the American Civil Rights Movement?
It leads back to what we have all said, and is that idea and that principle that your moral character and your moral compass is going to lead you. And in that, as he just alluded to, you may hate the actual element, meaning whatever oppressive stance or oppressive state that may be, whether it's segregation or any of those other oppressive tactics, but not hate the person themselves who are actually doing it, because that is your moral compass for your love for mankind, right? And so what King does is he looks at that, he looks at also, he's looking at South Africa at the same time, he's looking at Mandela, he's looking at Biko, he's looking at also what is going on and things that have happened prior to the civil rights movement within the country, right? And so the idea then becomes whether or not this idea of having a superiority in your morals, in your ethics, is it going to be enough? And so what he did was then he looked at Gandhi, and there are two instances where we see King actually having to practice, not just theoretically take it, but he had to learn this practice. Because most people didn't know, prior to, and she spoke of the Birmingham jail, and when he makes that final decision and he's trying to get other other religious leaders to accept the idea of nonviolence. Prior to that, King was still on that, let's say that teeter-totter between the theoretical and the practical. King actually was in some places taking a gun with him. And it's others who actually reminded him, particularly Bader Russell, who reminded him of Gandhi. Bader was even more of a follower of Gandhi in the early part of the civil rights movement than King. And so he began to implore King to look at those theories and not just quote unquote talk the talk, but we had to walk the walk as well. And so King had to then begin to kind of not only just theorize and understand through what he had already come to know through his religious studies and whatnot, but also how to make the practical application thereof. And that is something also that he had to continue to learn from God.
What I find particularly interesting is the stories that have been shared, but taking it back to what Dr. Masyada had said about this notion of nonviolent methods and the age of social media. So how can the principles of nonviolence be applied to today's polarized climate? And this is for any of the panelists. I don't know if Dr. Masyada, you may want to take the lead.
Sure, for that. So how can the principles of nonviolence be applied to today's polarized political climate? I honestly wish I had a good answer to that question. I'm not sure I do, other than moving from the theoretical to the practical, as has been suggested here. We need our political leaders and the average citizen to understand why. I love what was said. Hate the evil, not the evildoer. Right? We're at a point right now where there's no distinction between the evil and the evildoer. One and the other. There's no distinction there. I hate you because you are who you are, not because of what you believe, and we're going to respond accordingly. This is why we're seeing, I think, what we're seeing today. And so we have an obligation, I think, as citizens, as leaders in our communities, to demonstrate and model and practice this approach. There's a great civics model called Third Way Civics coming out of Minnesota, and some colleagues up there, that really engages students in looking at founding principles and documents, but also engaging in difficult discussions and conversations across values and beliefs, and understanding why it's important and necessary to engage in those conversations and to model those conversations. And sometimes I think where we draw the ball is we don't model. Our approach to debate and discussion in this country is what we see on Fox News or on MSNBC. And we think that's discussion, that's not discussion. And a true discussion, in a discourse centered around morality and consciousness, there's no winner. It's a conversation. It's an attempt to persuade, not an attempt to deny. In many cases, that's what our conversations come down to. I wish I had a better answer than that, but I turn it over to my colleagues.
I can add to that. Thank you, Steve. So Gandhi's ideas have been applied after Gandhi, obviously, in multiple countries, multiple times, multiple societies. Interestingly, down south in Costa Rica, we have University of Peace, UN mandated University of Peace in Costa Rica, and there's a huge statue of Gandhi there. And it was inspired by the ideal and vision of Gandhi. And if you look at India after Gandhi, we had many movements like Chipko movement, Vinoba Bhave's Buddha movement, and even Arab Spring. If you look at Maidans and Arab Spring in Tunisia, in Egypt, and if you look at do some Google and stuff, they take the name of Gandhi, inspired by Gandhian ideas. If you look at now, also, look at this event we are doing this year, right? So we are still enamored or inspired by Gandhian ideal, right? So I was telling in the beginning, Gandhi was, sometimes I say Gandhi is not a noun, it's a god. Right? I wrote my book, it is a force, it's a power. And Gandhi inspired people all over the globe. And he was not a magician. He was a normal person like you and I. Right? So I think I was talking about the rights of my friend in the beginning. We need to talk more about Gandhi, organize these ideas, these activities, write blogs. We have a blog site, Infinite Discoveries. We write about Gandhi as well. So let us say that if you say one thing 5 times, it becomes more popular. 10 times, it becomes more popular. So we need to talk more about the ideas, hate the evil, not the good. We need to talk about moral imagination and how to bring those ideas to our own lives. For Gandhi, there is no difference between private and public. If I tell a lie, then private lie, and you say, and if I say two things in family and lie outside, then that's not possible. You have to be truthful all the time. You have to be non-violent all the time. In Gandhi's ashram, there are 3 monkeys, you know. There are 3 monkeys in Gandhi's ashram, right? One monkey is closing his mouth, other closing his eye, other closing his ears. Right? So hear no evil, speak no evil, and listen no evil. Right? So this is something that very grounded in individual practice. And we need to talk about those who are involved. Thank you, Leila, for coming.
I would like to
add to that. The issue, though, when we look specifically in the United States, and we're talking about in today's time with social media and all of those things, we have to look at it from also a historical perspective. And when we look at it from a historical perspective, the actual ideology was also based in this idea that by having this moral compass and this leadership in your morals, that it would somehow translate to the others who are being immoral. And that is, like I mentioned earlier, where the idea of moral persuasion, and during the abolitionist movement, they simply called it moral persuasion, right? And so this concept, however, failed. That moral persuasion did not take place. It was actually violence that ended enslavement. And then when we look at Manifest Destiny, it was the same idea. Natives thought that at some point the moral temperature and moral turpitude would come through, and that it would supersede all of the things that were taking place, and that did not happen. And so then when you go forward into the 1900s and you get the civil rights movement, they pick up on the same concept of this moral persuasion, thinking that at some point, the morals of the ones that are doing these negative things and their immorality would change. And so here we are in the new millennium, and it still hasn't. So the issue is whether or not that idea that we have held on to for over 200 years now is something that is simply not working. And when we look at our younger generation, it seems that this is true, that they are no longer concerned about another person's moral persuasion. They're no longer concerned about whether or not this person is going to have morality. They are only concerned with how and what you do and how it affects me and what I need to do to stop it. And the issue then is, in doing so, both are losing the battle when it comes down to morals, right? Because they have given up on that idea, and society as a whole has given up on that idea that the moral persuasion would be the end all and would overcome at the end of the day.
I'd like to add to it what Dr. Mahapatra said about 3 monkeys that was touted by Mahatma Gandhi. Hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. That philosophy cannot hold truth in modern society. We cannot expect our younger generation in this digital world when we are bombarded with so much information. And the information which comes, it's factual, it's manipulated. How do we ask our younger generation to keep your eyes closed? Don't speak, don't hear. We need to change the moral compass and not expect that 200 years ago of morality will guide the principles or the present generation and keep them away from violence or ahimsa. That is expecting that is not practical in present day society. I think.
Incredible, insights, and so, that forces me to sort of, beg the question that given the challenges to moral persuasion and given our time that we have left, this is for everyone, and I'd like for each of you to address the question if you would, but given this challenge to moral persuasion and this 200-year-old idea, what are your hopes then in terms of having Gandhi's philosophy, MLK's philosophy of nonviolence continuing to influence global movements for justice and peace?
Gandhi or Martin Luther King, they never said that don't obey the law. They always said obey the law. They went to prison when they were penalized for something what they did. They said don't obey injustice, the law which is not being utilized for the purpose for which it is meant. So, coming to the point is, in present day society, we have to create a forum, or we the people have to create the legislation whereby it's fair, there is equality, there is no discrimination. All these laws were passed because the way the society moved on. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, that was the biggest legislation. One person, Rosa Parks, she refused to get up from her seat and give her place to somebody else. So the laws can be created by standing up for rightful issues. It should be non-discriminatory. There should be no discrimination between race, religion, or sex. And that's how that 1964 Act has expanded over the years. It has been clarified, and from one sentence it has become like hundreds and hundreds of cases where people's life, liberty, and justice is being considered in the courts. So we as the people have to make an effort to change our morality, which influences the legal principles. And that's in the hands of our religious leaders, how they shape the morality of the current society.
I have to jump in there as well, because that is also the core and the issue that we're having to deal with in this millennium, right? Because we're in the age of information, and everything is now right at the edge of your phone, and all of this information comes in, people are no longer shying away or blind to the fact that in this country, law is about power, and that our morals have been moving further and further away from the root of our laws, and that the issue that we see in almost every court, right, in criminal court, those who can pay for an expensive lawyer get better justice. When we look in civil court, Fortune 500 companies always press for this judicial hearing and a judicial judgment, because judges side with them 90% of the time. And so when we see that, and it actually goes back even to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, what we understand now in hindsight is that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was great. It was great theoretically, but it took the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to actually give it some real power, because it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 did they actually put in legislation that says this is what happens if you violate someone's rights. So the Civil Rights Act of 64 was wonderful theoretically, but it took the Voting Rights Act of 65 to actually give it some bite and actually give it the power. And that's the whole thing that we're looking at, right? The fact that the laws, right, have become more about power instead of the moral ideas and principles that they should be based on, right? Not just in theory, but in practice, right? Better lawyer, you get better justice. The larger the entities, the more money they have, the better their chances in court. And so these are the things that people now are face to face with, is right there in your face, on the news every day, on the news at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, on the end of your phone, in the social media, when people are showing these injustices. It's all right there in your face. That we have to, as a country, get back to where morals, or get to that point where morals are the basis of our laws, and not these other issues that we see that are facing us every day, particularly when it comes down to finances and money.
That's a great question, Moderator. There's an interesting parallel here. The exact same question was asked to Gandhi in 1924. How to apply the ideas of nonviolence to everyday times, to modern times. So American journalist Drew Pearson, he went to India in 1924. He stayed with Gandhi and he asked the exact same question. At that time also, modern in the sense we had motor cars, Ford cars came, aeroplanes coming that time. So that was kind of modernity, and I see now that there's an interesting parallel here. And Drew Pearson was asking Gandhi, Mr. Gandhi, how we are going to apply these principles to America? Because in America, the principle is, you can quote, violence met with violence. So Gandhi says, there's an interesting quote in the book, I will book with you now. So I'm paraphrasing. So Gandhi says, if there is an option between cowardice and violence, I will for violence. But for non-violence, you need to be more courageous than to be violent. So you need that deep moral conviction to be non-violent. There's a kind of strange coincidence. I was listening to, our president in America in Singapore in 2018, and he said very interesting. I wrote a blog on that. It was Gandhi. He said that anybody can wage war, but it is most courageous to make peace. It was Gandhi, and though it came from a different leader, but my point here is that today we are all human beings. Right? We have in our deeper core there is, I believe, there is a subtle human consciousness. And Gandhi would say we can appeal to that, can bring that non-violent core in us to the front, and we all must be agents of peace. Gandhi would say, soldier of peace or agent of peace. We all can be that. He was not peaceful in the beginning, we all know. If you read Gandhi's autobiography, he was not as he was in later years. He was violent. He had, a lot of instances he behaved violently. So Gandhi said, if I can do it, he can do it. And that thinking, I think, is still relevant today. And we need that moral imagination about nonviolence.
Some really good conversations here about morality and the role that it plays in nonviolence and in moral leadership. And so, as the conversation's gone on, I was thinking that I think that's one of the big issues we have, and I'm going to take it back to civil discourse again because, we all have our obsessions. Many Americans, research suggests many Americans may be suffering, but they will often vote for somebody who will make the person they don't like suffer more. And as long as that is the attitude that we have, then I think we're going to lack that moral leadership. I'll give you an example with going back to civil discourse. A gentleman I work with, very conservative Republican here from Florida, we've had some good conversations, he was in Congress. He served in Congress for a few years, and he really had a story where, as a hardcore conservative, there were times that he felt it necessary to reach across the aisle and make plans and legislation with those who shared different values, but still appreciation for our founding principles. And he often was basically told, if you reach across the aisle, you are going to lose your community. You are not going to have the ability to do what you want to do, because they are the enemy, and we need them to lose. And I think that's, getting back to what was said about, Gandhi hated colonialism, didn't hate the colony of the British, right? That's a completely different philosophy, I think, what we see today. We do know, though, that in the modern age, that nonviolence can work. Think, for example, of Parkland. Right after the events of Parkland, those young people organized massive protests, and we did see legislation passed in Tallahassee that impacted certain aspects of gun rights. That being said, if you don't keep your eye on the prize, as it were, no matter how moral you are, some of this stuff will get rolled back. We know already. The legislation passed out of Tallahassee a few years ago after Parkland has already been rolled back in this state. Think too, you mentioned the Voting Rights Act. We know that the Voting Rights Act has been massively rolled back over the past few years for a variety of reasons. And a lot of that does come down, I think, to that moral leadership, which I think is a big issue. We don't necessarily have moral leaders right now, no matter what political side of the battle, I think, that you're on. It's very hard to have these conversations. I know I'm really at a bundle of enthusiasm about this, so.
Well, Ms. Hirani, Dr. Mahapatra, Dr. Dixon, Dr. Masyada, thank you for your insights. Thank you for the conversation. We appreciate you being here tonight. Let's go ahead and give our panelists a round of applause. Trying to be mindful of time. time, but I know we have until 8. At this point, I'd like to ask if there are any questions from the audience for any of our panelists.
I'll make it really quick. I just really quick, I think there seems to be this sort of split on the panel between what sounds like almost sort of in regard to moral persuasion being effective, two really sort of tough-minded realists. At least that's what I'm hearing, that maybe you seem, you two guys, you seem kind of a little bit more pessimistic about the possibility of being successful, whereas I know Aurobinda is the starry-eyed ideal, Gandhian idealist. And well, we have a lawyer too, so you got to be a pragmatist. But I don't know, in regard to that, I guess, in connection with that, why do you think, given the historical context we're in now, maybe, as opposed to theirs, why are there no Gandhis and Kings now? Or are there? Or are we just missing out on them because like a cacophony of noise on the media and stuff? What do you think?
I think you touched on it. I think the cacophony of media has impacted what we see, but also, and it's going to be crude here, please forgive me, the old media slogan, if it bleeds, it leads. And there is no profit in nonviolence. There is no profit in moral leadership. And that's our core focus. Again, though, I do want to be clear that I do think that nonviolence can work. As I mentioned, Parkland, the finally getting a Borgfell, right? Things like that. It can work. So I'm not 100% pessimistic on this. But I think that in many cases it's drowned out by the noise because that's not what gets the clicks. I don't know where we'll go next. I think we will at some point see this next generation. I think of my daughter, who's 17, and she's my personal hero. She is very much a firm believer in the principles of Dr. King and Gandhi, and wanting to make a difference in the world through nonviolence. Although she's got a very filthy mouth, so just like a fatherly daughter, I suppose. But she will be up there, I think, on that stage one day, making a difference like that, I hope.
I'll give you a quick example from India. There's a movement going on in Northeast India, actually North India, Sonam Wangchu. So he's kind of considered Gandhian leader. So there are examples, not perhaps that many, but there are people working in a smaller scale. But I would say there are people believing, practicing Gandhian ideas. In my class in Jacksonville, I mean, we talk a lot about these ideas. In my class, every day, I tell my students, let us talk about what's happening now in America, and we always talk about the peaceful, dialogue way. So, I mean, I'm not saying Gandhi, but I'm saying that these ideas persist, they prevail, and people talk about that, people practice about that. Perhaps we need more momentum, more talk about, more ideas. But I think it is there.
In modern-day society, UN is our Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi, because they are the ones who are laying down the laws and principles for throughout the world how to live peacefully and without violence. So you don't have one human being, but you have an organization, and all the world leaders are taking part in that organizations.
Next one I mentioned, one that does come to mind. I spent a few years living in North Carolina, and our guest is Reverend William Barber, who has done a lot of work, particularly in North Carolina, but also nationally, around the area of nonviolence, particularly related to the George Floyd protests and George Floyd protests and issues they're having in North Carolina as well. So there are certainly folks out there who might not have the national stage folks like Reverend William Bauer and stuff, I think really do stand out.
Yeah, I'm glad that Dr. Mahapatra had brought up the topic of Sonam Wangchuk. I'm right here. Yeah. Sonam Wangchuk. So, Sonam Wangchuk, as you have quoted, that he is one of the nationalist leaders right now in India who is protesting against the current government for some special rights there in the constitution, the current constitution there. However, I feel that the time, as in the current age when he is utilizing or he is using the Gandhian philosophy for doing the same, is not as relevant as when Dr. Mohandas Gandhi had used it during the pre-independence period. Because at that time it was more of a nationalist idea that brought people together, and this time it is more of a political, against a political figure. This, I feel, somehow divides the people within the country itself, with this, even if they have some positive ideology behind it, but still it divides the people within the country, and that's how I feel that it may not be relevant in today's situation. Also, at one point, every one of the panel members has agreed that there is a need of having improvement in, or there is some sort of a drawback of the existing Gandhian philosophy. So I would like to ask the panel members if you had an opportunity of making version 2.0 of the entire thing, the non-violent movements, let's say, or a new philosophy of non-violent movement, what would it be according to you? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Gandhi would say that non-violence can be applied at all levels. It's not just nationalist struggle. It can be local. It can be. So his non-violence principle transcends locality, nationality, region, and religion. So if Gandhi was fighting against colonialism, so this was a localized protest, right? And I was listening to, again, I'm not in lay now, I don't know exactly what's going on, but as I'm following the news and developments, I was listening to Sonam and his wife. They say, we are not fighting against the government, right? So they say again and again. So they are fighting for the local rights, for sixth schedule, implementation of those things. So these are my comments on that. So non-violence can be applied in all places, doesn't depend on the area or locality. About new philosophy of non-violence, Gandhi says, I did not do nothing new non-violence. And he says that non-violence is as old as Himalayas. I was applying it in a context, right? But to emphasize again and again and again, one must have a deep moral conviction within before applying. So he would say, it is better to be violent than to be coward. There's one quote from Wade Miller. Wade Miller, we have never seen his name in America, Wade Miller. He was a journalist for the New York Times. He was covering Salt March. Right. And he was reporting for the New York Times, and he's writing from there, from India. And he says, I salute these people who are doing Salt March. They are not resisting police brutality, beating mercilessly. So he was saying, I don't have the exact words, it's in the book. So he said, I'm feeling kind of revolutionary, I'm feeling inhuman from inside, how we can do that to the peaceful protesters. Right? So Gandhi would say, one must need that kind of moral conviction to be non-violent worker. Academic articulation of work, it needs more, I would say, cultivation in in actually working one's being to become non-violent. So I don't know if that at this stage. Thank you.